Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay.
Welcome to the Dark Ascent podcast, where we help you become the god of your reality. This is episode 25, How to Stop Feeding Your Negative Manifestations. To learn more about our work, please visit darkascent.org. Hi everyone, welcome to our podcast. I am Melektoth, and I am here as always with my wife Elinara.
Hi, but I'm his favorite wife, though.
My favorite wife, yes. And we actually have a new silent guest that, if you're not on my mailing list, you may not know about yet. We got a new dog.
Yes, we did.
I figured we may as well announce it. He probably won't make any noises because he's just lazing on the love seat. We got a Samoyed last week, I think exactly a week ago, or is it a week and a day?
A week and a day.
A week and a day.
Those are called gotcha days. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah. Whenever you pick up a pet, they're called gotcha days.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep.
So we picked up, his name's Gino, a week and a day ago, and he's a Samoyed, and he is really awesome. If you go to the show notes, I will show a picture of him, because I know everyone wants to see him, and if you don't, then you don't count, so.
Exactly.
But if you want to go to the show notes, darkascent.org/DA025, and you can see a picture of our new doggy.
Who's about 3 or 4 years old. He's not a puppy,
He's not a puppy.
He's small for his breed, actually.
Yeah, he is. He's about 50 pounds. So if you hear any dog noises, that is why. So getting into today's podcast, we are talking about negative manifestations. And this is something I know plagues a lot of people. And in fact, someone specifically asked me to talk about this today. So I am, and it actually goes along really well too with a course that we're starting up, which I'll talk about later on. So our negative manifestations, it's a really big issue for a lot of people, and a lot of people want to know, how do you stop them? How do you stop manifesting negatively? And how do you stop, especially before it even starts, how do you stop negative manifestations from starting in the first place? So the way I like to talk about manifestations in general, and this is an analogy I've used quite a bit in the past. I've used it in my courses. I've used it in podcasts before. I talk about manifestations kind of like planting seeds. Okay, imagine that your life or your mind, really the same thing, is like a garden. And you get to decide what sort of seeds you plant in that garden, what sort of plants, what sort of flowers and other things you want to grow in that garden. And obviously your preference would be to have really nice, beautiful flowers and such, and you would not want to have weeds clogging up things, right? So that's sort of how our manifestations work, because when you have a garden, what is it that grows? What grows is what you water, what you take care of, what you give sunlight to or allow to be in the sunlight. If you keep a plant in the dark and don't give it water, we talked about this, I think, last time too.
Are you sure it was in the podcast?
It might have been in the course, actually.
Yeah, it was.
The Creating from Zero course. But if you don't give a plant water, you keep it in the dark, and so on and so forth, it's going to wilt and die away. And that's a lot like how our manifestations work, okay? Except our manifestations kind of beg for our attention. Now, in this analogy, watering plants, giving them sunlight, and so on and so forth, what that really means in practical terms is just giving them attention. Okay, now, it's really important to say up front that not just any attention will water your manifestation or feed your manifestation. Just thinking about something will not give it power. It's only when you give it your emotional reaction that your manifestations start to grow, whether it's positive or negative. So if I just think about a possibility of something, but don't feel anything emotionally with it, nothing's going to happen. I could think about negative things all day long, and if I don't feel any emotional reaction to those thoughts, nothing's going to come of it. So a lot of people have this idea that if you even give any airtime to negative thoughts whatsoever, that your whole life's going to fall apart, right?
You know, it's interesting because when you gave the analogy of the garden, it reminded me of a book, actually a series of books. Do you remember the Joanne Walker books, the Walker Papers? Mm-hmm. The series is the Walker Papers. And the main character is a shaman. And when she would heal people, she would go into their centers, their souls.
Oh, that's right.
And they were gardens. All of them were gardens. And if a demon was attached or something negative happened, the garden was very wild and dead.
Yep.
And if good things happened, then it was like really big and flowery and
flourishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that now. That's a really good point.
I was going to say that before, but you kept talking.
Yeah, well, excuse me. It is just a podcast.
It is. I couldn't insert myself, is what I meant.
But no, that's a really good point, though. And with this analogy, the garden of your soul or of your mind is reflected by your outer reality, which is why I said your life, your mind is the same thing, because one is a reflection of the other. Your life is a mirror of your mind, right? Just thinking about something negative is not going to make it happen. That's so important to realize and to not fear that, because just because you think about this negative thing that could happen, it doesn't mean it's going to happen. It doesn't mean that you're going to bring it about, okay, if you don't respond to it emotionally. And facing our resistance is such an important part of the process. And I've had clients before who literally have refused to look at their resistance. They were afraid to, because they believed that looking at the resistance would make it bigger, when it's actually the opposite. But they believed that us talking about their limiting beliefs and their current resistance was just going to make it bigger. And it's simply not true. So with positive or negative manifestations, you're only so-called watering them or feeding them if you are giving them your emotional response, your emotional reaction. So you want to look at your metaphorical garden within yourself and see what its current state is. Is it full of things that you want? Is it full of positive thoughts and positive feelings? Or is it full of negative things? We call them weeds, so to speak, negative manifestations. Because even negative thoughts and negative emotions are negative manifestations. They just haven't become physical yet. They will one day if you keep focusing on them, if you keep watering them. They're the seeds of your negative manifestations. So look at that garden and see, is it mostly positive? Is it mostly negative? Is it a mix of a little bit of both? And you'll find that whatever the state of that internal garden is, of your inner landscape, as I like to call it, will be reflected exactly as such in your life. If it's mostly positive in that garden, if you have mostly beautiful flowers and so on and so forth, positive thoughts, positive emotions, then you will find that your life reflects that in positive ways. If, on the other hand, you have mostly negative things going on, negative thoughts, negative emotions, negative beliefs, negative expectations, then you will find that life reflects that instead. So you have a lot of negative things going on, a lot of negative manifestations. If it's a bit of a mix of both, then that's what you'll have. And that's Law of Attraction 101. That's pretty obvious to a lot of people, but it's also not something people think about too much. And you might think, well, of course I'm negative. Life stinks. Like, my life is falling apart. Why wouldn't I be negative? But it's not that way. It's the other way around. Life stinks. Life is falling apart, if that's the case for you, because your mind is negative, because you've allowed those weeds to sprout up in your garden. So it's not your response to life. I mean, yes, you do tend to respond to life, but you started it.
Yep.
You began the process unknowingly. You planted those negative seeds and watered them regularly with your negative emotions.
It's so easy to do.
It is. And now your life looks how it looks. It can happen to any of us. Even if you're overall positive, you can still have that one area of life where it's negative. You know, I had something happen just recently, earlier this week. I won't go into details, but something where the negative seeds had been festering. I wasn't really taking care of them. I was playing the victim a little bit. Don't you say anything. And, you know, I hadn't been really taking responsibility. It was getting worse and worse. And eventually it sort of exploded in my face. And I had kind of a wake-up call. And I had to face the facts.
You got butt hurt.
Yeah, a little bit. I had to face the facts, and I had to say, okay, that's my doing. I did this. I have to change it. Okay, not just the external stuff. I mean, yeah, that has to happen too, but how I was interacting with this area of life was not what it should be. I lost sight of the things I knew.
And the thing is, you knew them, but you still didn't do it.
Oh, yeah, I know. And that's the horrible thing. Happens so much to us, right?
Yep.
We know these things, and yet we don't do them. And it grows and grows and grows. One thing Abraham Hicks says that I like, I've said this before, is they'll say, if you don't notice the resistance, don't worry, it'll get bigger.
Yep.
Okay. And eventually it'll hit you so hard that you won't have a choice but to look at it. So that's what happened. But it's easy to kind of get into that place, right? And you have to take responsibility for what's going on. So what you have to realize is that the negative thoughts that you allow in and the negative emotions that you allow in are like seeds that you are planting. And those seeds are either positive or they're negative. And those seeds that you plant and that you give attention to, regular, frequent attention to, will sprout into their own likeness in your external reality. Okay, so you're not going to plant one type of seed and get something totally different. You're not going to plant a seed expecting, you know, let's say tomatoes, for example, and get broccoli. That's not going to happen. You're going to get what that seed is. And so if you plant a lack seed and you water that seed by worrying about money and that kind of stuff, you're going to get lack in your external reality, and it has to happen. And the thing is that once a manifestation gets going, it really gets going, and it demands attention. So crossing analogies a little bit, we talk about like it being a garden, being like plants, you know, seeds that you plant. But now imagine those little plants can beg for your attention. Water me! Like little puppies or something, you know?
Yay.
Like Gino will sit here and beg for food while we're eating dinner.
Oh, he tried to eat our food tonight.
Yeah, he did eat Elinara's food.
Yep.
He'll sit there and just beg for food, and you sort of can't help but give him a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's sort of how our manifestations are, where they sort of beg for our attention. They sort of steal our attention away because it's so easy to think about them at a certain point. They become sort of magnetic after a while. You know, if you're used to watering that lack seed and it starts growing into a massive lack tree, it sort of consumes your attention. And every time you look at it, oh, well, I hate that tree and it's horrible. And then you go water it again or something. You know what I mean? Like you give it more attention. And the more you complain about it, the more that you are feeding it. So you have to realize that the seeds that you focus on the most, the seeds being the negative emotions or positive, it could be positive, the positive or negative thoughts or emotions, that you give your attention to, as you give them your attention, they are growing and growing and growing, and they will become physical things in your external reality or experiences or situations or whatever. So you have to realize you have to stop it. No one else can stop it. It will keep going. If you keep responding to life in the way that you've always responded to life, you will keep watering those same seeds and you will keep growing the same things you've always grown in that metaphorical garden. You will keep getting the same manifestations you have always gotten. You have to change on the inside for anything to change on the outside. You cannot expect a lucky break. The lucky break never happens if you're not changing first. You cannot expect outer reality to change if you are not changing first. And this is the thing that people don't want to hear. They want to get the magic technique that gets them the thing they want without them having to change. And it's like, well, if you wouldn't focus on the lack of your relationship or the lack of money or the lack of the job you want or how horrible your current job is or how horrible your current relationship is or whatever, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. If you wouldn't keep focusing on that, then life wouldn't keep bringing you that.
And life is really a huge creation project.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like, because why are we meant to be here?
Right.
We're not just meant to be tossed around by life. We're meant to learn how to create. So eventually, you learn by either Melektoth or I teaching you or someone teaching you that what you're doing is the opposite. You know, when you have the negative thoughts and emotions and everything.
Yeah.
But people that aren't as self-aware, you know, they don't get that. But the more we evolve with reincarnation or whatever you want to believe, the more we realize it. But that's why we're here.
Exactly.
We're not here just to let life just do whatever it wants.
Push us around.
Yeah. We're here to change.
And people go lifetimes.
Oh, yeah.
Without realizing this. Just a quick story that reminds me of this. I was talking to my mother earlier, and she is not a spiritual person. Actually, Elinara can fill it in because I didn't hear the first part of the conversation. Something about God taking away or something. What was that?
Oh, no, that was a good thing because that's not what you're thinking.
No, because we were talking about, no, it's not God that gives us the bad things.
She said, the Lord takes away and the Lord gives.
Yeah, that's right. That's an expression. Yeah.
Well, the expression is the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. But she said it backwards.
Yeah.
I don't remember why she said it.
Probably she's stressed about money. We're going on vacation this weekend.
Yeah.
She's stressed about money. And Elinara said, God's not the one that takes away. Yeah. She's like, no, well then who does?
And we both were like, we do. Or we do.
We do. She's like, really? That was the first time she's ever heard that before. Like, that was totally something new that she's, ever heard. And she said, how? And I said, by your negative attitudes. Now, I don't know if that stuck. It could have gone in one ear and out the other. I have no idea. But a lot of people have no idea. They put it onto the universe or to God or to the government or to religion or whatever, and they don't think about it. It's them. It's them that either give or take away from themselves. So there's no God out there who's going to give you something or take it away if you've been bad or just because he feels like it. I don't know. That's not how it works. It's you. I saw a post, a law of attraction group on Facebook the other day where this lady, and it was a really cool post at first. She was talking about how, she needed money. And so she was trying to manifest it. And she opened up one of her alternative bank accounts expecting maybe $100. And there was like $700 in there. And she said something about God has blessed me so much and thank God. And I was surprised. And it was more than that. I don't remember the whole context, but she was going on about God. And I was surprised for being the law of attraction group. And I just said, it wasn't God, it was you.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And everyone jumped on me. You should respect her faith. And the law of attraction for me is about responsibility, not giving your power away to some external force. Are they feeling like being nice today or not? Are they going to give you something nice or are they going to take it away?
But then again, if you're partnering with God or whatever, then it would be valid.
Sort of, but it's still in your court, so to speak. Like, you are the one that, we were talking about this in the course the other day, you are the one in the driver's seat. You're not giving up all control to some external being or something. Like, you are the one that has that control and that says, this is where I want things to go.
Sometimes I feel like we're not in control because what you think you want sometimes isn't true.
From an egoic perspective, yeah, but also we are the ones who have to decide where we want to go in life. No one's going to tell us that.
Yeah, well, that I agree with.
No God is going to give us blessings or take things away from us, and that's up to us. Yeah. And people wait around for years for God to give them that sign or that blessing. And it's not God. It's not God. It's you. I told this lady this, and like I said, everyone kind of jumped down my throat a little bit. And, but for me, the law of attraction is about responsibility. It's about you being the God of your reality, not giving over control to some other God. I
could just picture Abraham. If she told this story to Abraham.
Oh, I know.
They would say the same thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't God. Yeah, absolutely.
But it was them.
And, you can work with deities, you can work with different beings and such, but it's not in this attitude of being a servant or slave to that being, like they are greater than you or something,
It's a co-creation.
It's a co-creation. It's a partnership. But you are the one, it's your life, And with my particular beings I work with, if I ever said, "Oh, great beings, what do you want for me?" they would probably smite me. Not really, obviously, but they would not
Well, you just said it and it's fine.
They would not be particularly thrilled with me to give up my power, because that's not what they're about. Granted, work with relatively dark beings, but, it's just how it is. But that's just not how it goes. You don't give up your power. So you need to realize that it's you that are responsible for your life, for your manifestations that you are feeding, that you are watering. And if you don't like it, change it. Don't blame God. Don't expect some big break to happen, some luck, something to happen that changes your life. It's you. No one's coming to save you. And I think that is part of the weakness. I'm sorry to pick on Christianity for a second, but that's part of the weakness of, let's say, Christianity, because there's this savior idea. Like, I don't have to do anything because someone is saving me. No one's going to come save you. As long as you maintain your current attitude, life will maintain its trajectory. It will not change. And in fact, it will get worse, because it will get bigger until it hits you hard enough that you change. And that's not cruelty. People think, why is life so cruel? Why is the universe so unfair? It's not cruelty. It's a great mercy. Because if it hits you hard enough and you change, now you've learned how to get what you want. Now you've learned, oh, that was me. Like this thing that happened to me the other day, I was really dreading it.
Yep.
And it hit me. You know what? It was pretty awful. But I needed it. I needed that to remind me, you are giving up your own power, and stop it. Sometimes the universe has to slap you across the face. And so it's not cruelty that life does this at all. It's not cruelty. It is a great mercy, because it shows you where you are not free. It shows you where you are giving up your power. And it may have to show you through pain sometimes, but it will get the message across. And when you get that message, it will stop. But not until then, not a moment sooner than the moment you receive that message. It will deliver that message. If it's now, if it's in a year, if it's in a decade, if it's in 50 years, if it's in a lifetime or 10 lifetimes, it will deliver that message. And it will not stop until you change. If you want life to change, you change first. And that's so, so important. So how do you change? How do you stop feeding those negative manifestations? Essentially, you have to stop emotionally reacting to them. And that's hard. It's hard for something bad to happen and for you to not react to it. You can't just hope for good things. That won't work. You have to stop reacting to the bad things for them to stop. Okay? So when it no longer frightens you, when it no longer scares you, then it will stop. It's like you ever have a particularly persistent nightmare and it's recurring and it doesn't seem to stop until you get what it's trying to tell you. I've heard of that happening all the time.
Oh, I'm sure it does.
And once you realize what that's trying to tell you, for example, I've heard of people who, let's say they're being chased by a monster or a serial killer or something like that in their dreams, and they're just behind them ready to cut them apart or something, or dream after dream after dream this happens. And one day the person turns around and stands their ground. And then the monster turns out to be, not a monster at all. It turns out to be a friend, that wasn't ever trying to hurt them. I've heard of that kind of thing.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
I've heard of people, like, once they get their stuff resolved.
Yeah.
But I've never heard of what you said.
Yeah, I have heard some stories like that.
Crazy.
Not to me personally, but I've seen stories like that from people.
Well, you're on the internet 24/7.
Well, I do sleep a few of those hours.
Well, maybe 5.
But, when you turn around and you face it and it goes away, it dissolves. And that's sort of how these things are in life when, this big scary fear. Like for me, this big scary thing that happened, it was that monster. And I was fearing it, and then it struck, and it was painful. But you know what? It wasn't really as bad as what my mind was making it out to be. It was something I could cope with. And I lived. I survived. I woke up the next morning, and the sun still came up. I still ate breakfast, Everything was the same. Life went on. And that's what you'll find. There really are no monsters. It's just all life being a friend trying to show you where you are stuck. So you have to stop reacting emotionally for that to stop. I call it non-reaction. You have to be mindful. You have to just be aware of this stuff going on and just refuse to give it your emotional attention. That's not an easy thing. And there's no quick trick or, secret key or affirmation or anything you can do to make that easier. It's just something you have to choose to do. Will you keep fearing these things and keep feeding them with your emotions and so making them bigger? Or will you just stop? And as always, acceptance is the key to that. That is really what it is. But acceptance is an easy word to say, but not an easy word to implement.
Yes.
But it does come down to acceptance. Am I willing for this to be what it is? Am I willing to stop trying to change it? Stop trying to run away from it? And when you stop running, it will dissolve. It will dissolve almost immediately. You just have to stop running away from it. You just have to accept it for the moment, and it will stop. So non-reaction is the way, because how do you water these seeds? How do you feed your manifestations? You give them emotional attention. How do you stop? You do the opposite. You stop giving them emotional attention. You stop reacting emotionally. You are non-reactive. You are just at zero.
And your emotions might come through you.
Yeah, they might come through you. They might be pretty overwhelming at first.
Yeah.
The emotions will come up, but don't push them away. Don't do anything with them. Just embrace them, allow them, accept them, and they will flow through. And then it will be weaker. And that manifestation will wave its arms and yell and scream and say, "Look at me, I'm scary." It will. You'll want to react.
You should have done that in a scary voice.
I don't have it.
Yeah, you have a scary voice.
I do not have a scary voice.
Yes, you do.
I have an evil laugh. I don't have a scary voice.
Oh, yeah, you do.
It's not here right now. But that will try to intimidate you. It will try to make you fear it and react to it. And you have to just refuse. I've compared it before to like a child trying to get your attention or trying to annoy you. And if you give in and act annoyed, they've won and they'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
If you say, okay, no. If you stick to your boundaries, they stop, right? If they can push you over, they will push you over. But if you stay steadfast, then they won't. So it's sort of like that. You have to not react. You have to not give in. And the manifestation will weaken. I used to call it starving. Literally, you're starving your manifestation. You are not watering it. You are not feeding it. You are not giving it attention. It is withering away, which is what you want. You want to wither away those weeds. You want to let them just dissolve. And it will. But you have to take the first step of not reacting. So there's a lot to that. I know it's not easy, but it's something you have to do. And this will be hopefully the beginning of you being able to do that. And you just have to sit down and apply it. But if you do need help with this, and I think the great majority of people do, I mean, I do a lot of times.
Yup.
And I teach this. If you need help with this, I am launching a course called The Anatomy of Resistance, because what I find, and no offense, is that most law of attraction teachers don't have a clue about resistance. They don't have any idea. So there's so many misconceptions out there about resistance, just countless. I'd have to talk for another hour to name all of them. But there's just not a lot of good material out there about how resistance works and how to dissolve it reliably. You know, we might be able to dissolve it for a while, but then we get stuck. The mind rebels. The mind stops releasing it. And you have to know really how it works on a deep level to reliably be able to dissolve that resistance. This is the very beginning of it. This is the introduction. But I am launching this course, The Anatomy of Resistance, to really fill in that gap, to teach how it all works, how it all comes together, and how you can dissolve resistance. So that's being launched in a couple of weeks on September 16th. So if you want to check that out and sign up for the course, you can go to darkascent.org/resistance. So I appreciate you listening to this, and I hope that it makes sense to you. If you want to check out the show notes, read the transcript, or start a discussion about this topic, you can head over to darkascent.org/DA025. Oh, or if you want to see a picture of Gino, the dog.
Yes.
Which we call him Smiley Dog, or I call him Smiley Dog.
Yes, and King Gino.
King Gino, because he just lays on his love seat all day, and I call it his throne.
Yep.
So go over to the show notes if you want to see King Gino.
He's going to be our mascot.
He's going to be our mascot.
Declare it now.
I agree. It's so goofy and at odds with the image of Dark Ascent, but it's also perfect.
Yes. We have Dark, and he's literally all white.
He's all white, yeah.
So there you go. Now we need a black cat.
That's right. We need a black cat for light and dark.
See?
Okay, coming soon, the black cat.
Or the black dog.
Or the black dog. So, I hope you enjoyed this. We will return in 2 weeks because we are away for a week on vacation. So that's awesome. I would be away for 2 weeks anyway because we do this every 2 weeks. But in the interim, we are on vacation in Ocean City, Maryland. So we'll be having fun. You should be jealous.
That was crazy manifestation too.
That was a crazy manifestation.
Oh my God.
Long story, but maybe next time. But we will return in 2 weeks for another episode of the Dark Ascent podcast. Thank you for listening, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.